The Jews and the moon. What does this combination mean for you? You may think of Israel sending a satellite, which unfortunately didn't make it, or a shoot to the moon. But I'm talking about a tradition that goes back for thousands of years, in which the Jewish people self-consciously draw an analogy between their destiny and the moon, their history and the moon. The moon goes through cycles of uh, waxing and waning, basically disappearing from the night sky for a few days and then reemerging once again until it reaches the full brilliance of the full moon. Jews also have their ups and downs where we're come close to extinction, extermination with our numerous enemies, but eventually reemerge and come back to be a flourishing culture. This analogy goes back a long way, and it has some roots in some interesting legends, and remains reinforced and reinvigorated by certain performances, certain rituals that observational Jews perform regularly. And I think this particular topic is an appropriate topic for the wider rubric of Jewish cultural astronomy. I'm not quite clear 100% what cultural astronomy is. Seems to me to mean to include everything that is not part of the global tradition of computational or observational astronomy. A global tradition because it begins at least with the Babylonians, moves on to the Greeks who take over observations of the Babylonians and some of their methods and carry this further, including trying to force fit the motions on certain preconceived geometrical models. It's taken then to India by Alexander the Great, where it merges to some indigenous Indian traditions, and it's ditto for Persia. The products of the Greek astronomy, mainly Ptolemy's masterpiece, the Almagest, the textbook in astronomy for at least 1,000 years, is translated into Syriac and then into Arabic. And this is the main, again, text upon which the astronomers in Islamic civilization, stretching from the west in Spain and Morocco and extending east into Iraq and Persia and beyond, for half a millennium at least, had a period of great creative renewal, investigation, innovation, refinements of observations, a lot of tweaking of the theories, and then it moved back to Europe, where it went through the radical transformations of Kepler, Newton, and Einstein, but then again moved around the world as the New World became developed. The United States became a major center of the same global tradition, and China, Japan, and all over the world. Anything that belongs to this tradition of trying to compute mathematically as precisely as possible the positions and orbits of the heavenly bodies and fit them into some overarching physical cosmological theory that tells us how the universe is structured and how it develops and possibly where we're headed, even if it's light years away, is the science of astronomy. And all other traditions are cultural astronomy. That's how I get it. These include Native American indigenous traditions from the Inuits in the north through the Aztecs and Mayas in Central America and the Incas in South America, many cultures in Africa, Asia, who had their own star lore, usually not refined in terms of the mathematical models, but still considered a valid field of inquiry and certainly a valuable cultural asset. And so this is something that fits into the rubric of cultural astronomy, and I get it. And so what I would like to do in this talk is to discuss what I think is the most prominent feature in Jewish cultural astronomy, and that is the self-proclaimed identification of the Jews with the moon, not the other moon, but sort of our parallel courses in cosmic time, and with particular emphasis on rituals and performances that to this day embody this tradition. So that's what we'll be talking about in this short talk, and I hope you'll find it enjoyable. So as I've said, my main interests are the ongoing and by now fixed elements of Jewish praxis that are founded on these pieces of cultural astronomy. Although, by my definition, observational mathematical astronomy, the science that reaches back to ancient times and continues to be studied at universities, does not fall within the purview of cultural astronomy, I cannot omit the cultural consciousness that among Jews, that Jews are distinguished by their experience in astronomy, and for this reason, it is incumbent upon every Jew to master astronomical calculations. The Talmud has this to say. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi on the authority of Bar Kapara. This is the training tradition. Those of you who know Islamic studies, this is what you find the Isnad and Hadith, but they didn't begin with Hadith. We bring a train with a certain authority, simply relaying what he heard from his teacher, who heard from his teacher. And this statement that is being relayed now is the following. He who knows how to calculate the cycles of the Kufot and the planetary courses, the Mazalot, does not do so, of him Scripture says, they regard not the work of the Lord, nor have they considered the operation of his hands. Verse in Mosiah. Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know that it is one's duty to calculate the cycles and planetary courses? Because it is written in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 4, for this is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations. What wisdom and understanding is in the eyes of the nations? One must say that it's the calculation of the cycles and planetary courses. There's a certain Jewish cultural self-consciousness of being expert in astronomy, of being recognized as such by the nations, and therefore Jews must always be on guard to be well-informed of astronomy, to know how to do the basic astronomical calculations, because this is our fame among the nations of the world. Now, beyond this general point, let's concentrate now for the rest of this talk to the theme of Israel being likened to the moon. Now, the beginning of this odd connection between Jews and the moon seems to me to be found in the creation story in Genesis and the verse describing the creation of the sun and the moon. The verse seems to contradict itself. The first part of the verse says that God created two great luminaries, Shnei Marot HaGedolim in Hebrew. And then it says they are the great luminary, Hamor HaGadol, and the small luminary, Hamor HaKatan. So what is it? Are there two great luminaries, or is one great and one small? This question is addressed in a Agadah, in a sort of a legendary, imagined conversation between God and the moon, where the moon comes and complains and says, regarding the first verse, that God created two great luminaries with this odd phrase, two kings can't serve with one crown. There is only one crown, that one celestial body that can be crowned with the designation, the great luminary. You can't have two. So God says, you're right. So you make yourself smaller, and then the sun will be the great luminary, as it says in the second part of the verse. So we've taken care of the exegetical question, the hermeneutical question, and now we have the sun, the great luminary, and the moon, the smaller luminary. But the moon doesn't like that. The moon says, what, I just came to you with a legitimate complaint, and I have to diminish myself? So the conversation continues. And of course, to be the smaller luminary is not good enough. God suggests in the course of the conversation that, well, okay, instead of then being the great luminary, you will be the luminary according to which the Jews, my chosen people, fix their calendar. And the moon says, well, that's not full compensation. Yes, the Jews have fixed their count, their months are fixed by the cycles of the moon, but these are pegged to the solar year. We have what's called a lunar solar calendar, in which we have the months keep pace more or less with the solar year by having leap years, 7 leap years every 19-year cycle. So this is not full compensation. I'm still not, at the level of the sun. I'm still dependent on him. And finally, God sort of says, well, I guess I made a mistake. And all I can say is that in the monthly temple ceremony, when the new moon was celebrated in the temple, as in all festivals were in the temple by sacrifices, there will be a guild offering. Guild offerings, korban chatat, were brought on holidays, but the only holiday in which it's specified that the guild offering is for God is the new moon. And this again is an exegetical question. Why? What does it mean, a guilt offering for God, chatat l'Hashem, and why should it be on the new moon in particular that this guilt offering is offered? So here it is. Well, we're sort of as strange, incomprehensible as it seems, we're asked to atone. God is asking us to atone for his deed of making the moon smaller by bringing this sacrifice every month. But this actually is not a permanent condition. The diminution of the moon is an act which will be repaired in the eschatos, in the messianic area or the end of days. If they're both one and the same is another question, in which, as the prophet Isaiah tells us, the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be like the light of the 7 days of creation. So we have here an eschatological hope, a sort of messianic hope, looking forward to the end of days when the moon will no longer be a smaller luminary, no longer go through this sort of painful process of waxing and waning every month. And this is where the Jews latched onto it, because the Jewish people also go through these cycles of persecution and rebuilding, persecution and restoration, as we have over the centuries across the globe. And we still maintain this messianic hope, that a messianic vision, that in the end of days, this will be, this light, the glory of Israel, will be permanently restored. So there is this intimate connection between Jews and Jewish history and the moon and its cycles and its status temporarily until the end of time as the lesser luminary. A different ancient text, we're talking here of Genesis Rabbah, an ancient midrash, says that the diminution of the moon was a punishment for the moon's intruding into the sun's territory. Sometimes you see the moon during daytime. This is an intrusion, a trespass, and as a punishment, the moon was made smaller. Now getting to my theme, Israel likened to the moon. Again, from Genesis Rabbah, we have this passage. Rabbi Nachman said, so long as the light of the greater luminary is around, the light of the smaller one is not noticed. In other words, the moon may be above the horizon, at least for part of the day, but we don't notice it because it's outshined greatly by the sun. So long as the light of Esau, Jacob's brother, symbolizes Rome, symbolizes the arch enemy of the Jewish people, so long as his light is around, the light of Jacob, that is the light of the Jews, is not noticed. When the light of Esau sets, Jacob's light is noticed. And then we cite the verse from Isaiah, "Come and illuminate, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord shines upon you. For darkness covers the earth, and fog covers the nations, but God shines upon you, and his glory is to be seen upon you." So Israel is like the Jacob, the smaller brother of Esau, and so long as Esau, the arch enemy, the nations of the world who are opposed to Israel, are in a position of dominance, the light of Israel is not noticed. But in the eschatos, at the end of days, the light of Esau will set, and the light of Jacob will shine. And this notion of the renewal of the moon and its eventually coming to completion at full moon is symbolic of the continual rejuvenation and renewal and revivification of the Jewish people, persecution after persecution, Holocaust after Holocaust, deportation and exile after deportation and exile. Yet the Jews always bounce back, and their light comes back to shine, as does the moon is reflected in Birkat Levana, this blessing which Jews cite every month as to commemorate the natural phenomenon of the moon's cycles. There are a number of blessings that form part of the Jewish prayer book, which are said on the occasion of certain natural phenomena. Most of them are not regular. Like, for instance, there's a short blessing that's said when you see lightning, or when you hear thunder, or someone who does not live near the ocean and sees the great ocean. Others are cyclical. For instance, the blessings that's said every spring when the trees come into bloom, and you go out and actually visualize, you notice them. Similarly, there's a blessing that is said at when the new moon is shining every month. It was originally, it's a short text, which is just like the very short blessing that said when seeing thunder or lightning. But over the course of the time, it developed into a full-blown ritual with prayers and psalms, and as we'll see later, even song and dance associated with it. And part of the reason is that the renewal of the moon, the moon coming back to shine and getting bigger and brighter every night, is taken by Jews as symbolic of their rejuvenation and their restoration, and always having in mind the ultimate eschatological recitation at the end of days. So there's a passage in this long blessing that's said in Birkat Levana, this rite which is practiced at the beginning of a month when we go outside, actually see the moon, and then say the blessing. And it has a line which says that the moon should renew itself like a crown of glory for those born from the womb. Israel, born from the womb of Sarah and so on, who will eventually renew themselves and like the moon, and glorify their Maker for the sake of his glorious kingdom. And some add the following request: "May it be your will, Lord, my God and God of my forefathers, to repair the moon's defect, so that there be no deficiency in it. Let the light of the moon be like the light of the sun, and like the light of the 7 days of creation, as it was before it was reduced, as it says the two great luminaries. And may the following verse be fulfilled through us. They shall seek the Lord their God and David their king. So there's something messianic, eschatological about this phenomenon when we see the renewal of the moon and we pray that the moon be restored to its original glory as being one of the great luminaries, and light of God shine on the whole world, and the renewal of the worship of God and the house of David. Welcoming the new moon has a stature of welcoming the divine presence, the Shekhinah, and hence it's customary to recite it on Saturday evening, the end of when the Jewish Sabbath lets out after the evening prayer, once a month if it's not cloudy or anything. It's customary in many, maybe most synagogues, to go outside and as a communal activity recite this, not just the blessing, but the entire set of prayers that have been appended to it. And you see here a picture of one such celebration in Israel, dancing at the end of the celebration, which I'll get to later. You have here also a video, which I can't show on my video, which shows the singing and dancing. The prayer is often posted in large letters on the wall, the exterior wall of the synagogue, so that people going outside don't have to take a prayer book with them and try and read it in the dark, but can see it on this illuminated plaque. I took this photograph from my own synagogue here in the Galilee, and you see these large letters, and actually it's become a phrase in sort of an idiom in Jewish speech, otiot kiddush levana, letters the size of this ritual of the blessing of the new moon, because they're written on these huge letters so that someone can, at a distance, can read the prayer off the wall of the synagogue. And then it's customary to sing and dance, and what's sung is actually taken from a litany that's recited on the morning of the Sabbath, which was one of the most ancient litanies in the Hebrew prayer book, which incorporates verses praising God for having created the heavens. Much of this in Psalms. One of the things we glorify God for, which we see represent God's glory and magnificence and omnipotence, are the heavens that He created, so vast and so beautiful and so luminous. And they will sing in Hebrew, it's Toive me'oroi shebara Eloheinu. And here is the English translation of this litany. Good are the luminaries which our God created, made with understanding, wisdom, and insight. He endowed them with energy and power to dominate within their sphere of the universe. There's some allusions here to what we speak later on as astrology, the fact that God has given and empowered this humanly bodies with the ability to illuminate, to heat the earth, and thereby vivify the earth, something that's still true today, whether or not you like astrology. But the heavenly bodies, in particular the sun, do exert a huge amount of influence upon the earth and upon human daily life. And this is considered to be that they've just simply been delegated this power by God, and we celebrate that. Full of splendor, they radiate brightness. Their brilliance adorns the universe. Rejoicing and rising and exalting and setting, with reverence, they obey the will of their Creator. Glory and honor they give to his name, and sing his sovereignty with joyous praise. He summoned the sun and shed its light. He set the cycle of the moon's phases. And we have here in the prophet Isaiah a hint of this eschatology. A verse which says, "And the light of the moon shall be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of the 7 days." Isaiah chapter 30. On the day the Lord shall bind the fracture of his people, and the stroke of their wound he shall heal. So the repair, the healing of Israel from all the wounds and fractures that is suffered from thousands of years of exile and persecution will be healed and treated by God at the same time that he heals and treats the damage that was done to the moon when it became diminished and could not rate and lost its status as a great luminary. Now finally, I want to talk about the special relationship between women and the moon. Women have a special place in this idea of the celebration of the new moon. Again, which has it manifests itself in practice these days. Perhaps I don't know how widespread it is, but it's on the books, and I believe it's still in practice among many observant Jews. According to tradition, when the Jews collected gold in order to make the golden calf, the women refused to hand over their jewelry. They did not want to participate in this, the cardinal sin of Jewish history, certainly since the exodus from Egypt. And as a reward for the refusal to participate in making the golden calf, they were given an extra holiday each month, holiday which is for women only, and that is Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the 2 days of the first month, in which women refrain from certain types of work. It's a very minor holiday, the first day of the Jewish month, of the month, for all Jews, men and women, but it's marked only by a special prayer appended to the morning service, so it you either start early or end later or both, but it's not more than another 15 to 30 minutes. And that's it. There are no feasts, and there are no nothing that one cannot do. That one no refraining from activities such as is practiced with regard to the Sabbath and holidays. But for centuries, at least, it has been traditional for Ashkenazi women in particular, that is, Jews living in the European countries, not those living in the Islamic countries, to refrain from some work on the first day of the lunar month. Usually, it was the traditional duties of cooking and sewing, which were, until the last generation or so the things that were expected of women and that women were expected to do on their own. And so some modern authorities, notably the Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, whose book was first published in 1884, considered this to be normative binding practice. Although each woman is free to decide what work to refrain from. In other words, it doesn't. Traditionally, women would not sew or cook because that was the work they did. It's up to a woman to decide, what holiday she's going to take with regard to the type of duties she performs. And today, some women gather together on the first day of the month for study and prayer. Anyway, these notions, the cultural self-identity as a people is distinguished by their prowess in astronomy, and then people who identify with the moon as for its going through cycles of diminution and even disappearance and then rejuvenation, but only to reappear the next month and become a full shining object again, as Jews have taken to be as representative, symbolic of our the ups and downs of our history, but with the hope that in the end, at the end of days, in the eschatos, the moon will be completely repaired and will become a great luminary again, and the Jews will again shine, reflecting the light of God upon the nations, led by the house of David. And then the special role that a special attachment to the new moon in particular that was that women have in the Jewish tradition. Many will probably say that the biological cycles of women mirror in a way the monthly cycles of the moon, but in Jewish tradition, if that's mentioned, it's only as a minor point. The main point being again that women are rewarded for refusing to hand over their jewelry when the Jews built the golden calf.